Hello and welcome to a very special simplified chat about 2024 ad tech predictions. I'm Frost Prelo. I'm the CEO of Simplify, and I'm so delighted today to be joined by some of my favorite people in the ad tech world. As a matter of fact, I think my favorite people in the ad tech world. And that is one, Rob Norman, who's with us. Rob is best known for working for WPP and all its predecessor companies for 30 years. I know he doesn't look that old. And eventually finding his way to be the chief digital officer of Group M. More recently, Rob serves on several boards in the ad tech community, including, I'm super happy to say, Simplifies. And Linda Clorizio also joining us. Linda's best known for being a pioneer in the ad tech industry, leading advertising.com for many years. And in her 20 years, she's witnessed all the ins and outs of the industry. She brings a fantastic amount of wisdom and experience to Simplify's board. So thanks, Rob and Linda, for being here.
Hey, Frost.
We're really pleased to be here, Frost, and we're glad that you were your favorite board members.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I should say independent board members, not to leave anybody out here. Um, anyway, which are everyone will enjoy. Um, so normally our marketing department just comes to me for ad tech predictions, and our marketing department has wised up and figured out that my predictions aren't that exciting or accurate. So we had the brilliant idea to bring in some smart people into this discussion, in Rob and Linda, and talk about where we think the industry is going in 2024. So really looking forward to getting Rob and Linda your thoughts on a variety of the hot topics in the space and how we think they're going to evolve in 2024. So let's just jump right in. Probably the hottest topic in the space is artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI. There's been a lot of discussion about how AI might impact advertising in general and ad tech in particular. What do you guys think? And where do you see the impact coming in, especially in the short term in 2024? Linda, you want to take a stab at that?
I think AI is already having an impact on advertising. Certainly, there are AI applications that are being used right now for ad creative. And I know a number of companies that are doing that and using that. So we're already seeing the implications of it. The question, I think, as we head into 2024 is whether it's going to be used in other parts of advertising, like in planning and other areas. And I predict that we will start to see some of that. However, I do want to say that AI is really a tool. I don't think it's ever going to fully replace, what we see in the advertising world, but I do think it's going to be a tool to drive efficiency.
That makes sense, Rob.
Well, I think if you think about AI in terms of large language models, then large language models and the analysis of big data sets and natural language are absolutely with us. The ability to create enormous taxonomies of different media types and so forth and harmonize them in whatever way you want them to do is very much with us. I think that on the creative side, we've long had a very granular mechanism for distributing advertising at the impression level. We've never really been able to make ads at the impression level, and I'm not saying we ever will, but my suspicion is that we'll be creating ads for much narrower cohorts of people in the performance end of the advertising business. And that will be a big deal. The degree to which that is built on very rapid iterations of stuff that's created by people as opposed to stuff that's generated in mid-journey and by other prompts, I think is an open question. And it feels to me that visual side of Gen AI and AI from an origination point of view still has quite a long way to go. And I don't see that as being a huge 2024 impact.
Yeah, I think the infrastructure required to spawn individual level ads is needs to be worked on by the ad tech companies. Just make sure the pipes are ready. The industry, in my view, has been forever really focused in using at least machine learning to optimize audiences to a fairly static or small number of ads. And so now you have the opportunity to optimize ads to various audiences, and just how small those audiences become, I think, will be the interesting piece of this.
And I think there's an efficient frontier involved in this. There is probably a limit below which, in a cohort size, it's not valuable to target any more granularly than that. And I think there'll also be an issue of reconciling the use of Gen AI and millions of ad formats with the emission side of the business and the sustainability agenda in all biddable media, but particularly in display and video programmatic.
I've also never really bought this thing about, individualized ads. I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to drive scale with advertising. I mean, sure, within certain targeted cohorts, but I think all the experimentation that the industry has had to further personalize and further individualize only goes so far, because you still come back to the issue about scale.
No, that's true. It's back to Rob's point about the certain number of cohorts. There'll be an efficient frontier when you get to X number of cohorts, probably for a lot of products.
But I do suppose that what you can think about with sort of catalog type of businesses, anyone that's got a catalog of ads that may have thousands or even tens of thousands of SKUs in that ad, by the time you get down to every pack size and color and promotion and everything else, it's certainly going to be the case that people will be able to generate ads out of every SKU that they own. And I can see that being kind of a not insignificant factor or feature over the coming years.
Yeah, and of course, that many of the retargeters do that to a large effect, especially with SKUs that have been seen. To me, yeah. Then how do you spawn off of that and create more ads from different SKUs would be interesting.
I'd like to meet the AI that generates the ads for Temu, and Chinese online merchant that seems to sell products that can't possibly exist in the real world.
Well, advertising's never been known to advertise anything that might not exist, but who knows? Well, shocking. That's true. Let's see. Another topic that's hot on the minds of any ad tech conference that you go to is this one of retail media, and how big that business is, how many people will participate. Amazon, clearly the dominant leader today. Lots of others looking for a piece of it. Rob, where do you see retail media going in 24?
It seems like the force is with it. And I think we need to think about it in two big buckets, which is the on-platform or on-site use of retail media, in which Amazon is the dominant player, with Walmart Connect probably in second place. And then with a few other quite fast growing on-site opportunities, people like Uber, who are offering a different kind of retail media. The other side of it is what goes on off-site, as in media decisioning that is driven by the transaction data that comes from retailers. And it's clear that transaction data has joined intent data and social data as a very, very, very important signal in all forms of digital advertising. So I think the transaction as a signal will be a very big deal in 2024 and beyond.
Okay, Linda, I like that. Tell Rob why he's wrong.
No, I was going to say I really don't have anything to add to that. I agree with everything that Rob just said. So this is going to be a trend that's continuing, that's going to go beyond where it started, which was with sort of retailers to other big digital properties that are holding a lot of first-party data, and joining that data with programmatic capabilities so that they can sell off of their own site, off of their own data.
Yeah. Oh, I was sorry, Linda. I thought you were going to disagree vehemently, but no, you're agreeing vehemently there. Yeah, I think what's interesting to me is that many data owners have in the past said, hey, the way I'm going to monetize my data is I'm going to pack it up in segments and I'm going to ship it off to a DMP and they're going to sell it to all these DSPs. And I think that has been an unsatisfying experience in terms of revenue for many data owners. So here's another way for, in the famous words of whoever said it, everyone's an ad network, for any data owner to become an ad network, even if they don't have a lot of O&O inventory, but to use their data to power, especially if it's valuable transaction data, like Rob said, to use that to power an advertising network off property. But Rob, you sounded like you had another thought on the topic.
Obviously, the pricing of that data is an important factor, because there is a premium over a standard CPM that will be worth paying in order to have certain amounts of transaction data informing it, but there'll be premiums that aren't worth paying as well. And those premiums are going to be different depending on which category you're in and the degree to which reach is top of your agenda, because big reach advertisers are only going to have so much need for super premium transaction data.
Yes, people selling soap probably don't need super targeted data, would be my guess, assuming most of the U.S. population uses soap these days.
Less than you'd hope.
Very, very good. So the other topic that we have has been big, and maybe it's getting long in the tooth now as a prediction topic, but it's been a staple, and that's the world of connected television, which is gained a lot of momentum, but still has a long ways to go. So, Linda, where do you see CTV advertising evolving in 2024?
I mean, really in two areas. I mean, first, it's going to continue to grow from the perspective of supply. Maybe not as much as it has grown in the past, but it will continue to grow, particularly as some of the subscription streaming players, offer an AVOD tier, an ad-supported tier. So I think you will see that, continuing to happen. And, as they're hitting price, there's sort of pricing flexibility that's not as much on the subscription side. So again, that's going to push more off into ad-supported tiers. But I also think in terms of the pricing of the connected TV advertising itself, I think you're going to see, more variations in that. Some of that has been sold at a very high CPM. And just like in television, traditional television, there were different pricing tiers for television advertising. I think you'll start to see that happen in connected TV. And that is why, just to give a pitch for Simplify, as you well know, Frost, Simplify has now introduced ZTV, which is it's a bit of a lower price CTV option, that has basic geo targeting and not necessarily all the bells and whistles that you might see with some other connected TV advertising offers. So I do think it's going to be mature. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to be an interesting part of the sector to watch.
Yeah, thanks for that, Linda. The ZTV is our zip code targeted. So what's sort of the premise of that is, hey, for a low teen CPM, which is a very comfortable price range for a lot of local TV and cable buyers, they can see targeting that's much tighter than what they're used to getting. That might be a whole DMA or a cable zone, and can just target in on the zips that they care about. And so, yeah, we've seen a ton of interest, really a lot of linear crossover interest. I think all the digital guys or digital guys and gals who are buying have gotten on board with some of the very audience targeted, but this has really appealed to a lot of linear buyers we've seen. So it is exciting. Rob, what are you thinking? Where do you think CTV is headed?
Well, buyers have always wanted a bigger supply of data informed, addressable TV. That's what they've always wanted. They've wanted to be able to control the targeting in terms of demographics, behaviors, and geographies more than they've been able to do before. And so you've got to assume that one of the advantages of CTV will be to make more of that available over time. We're in this kind of odd phase, aren't we, where we went from sort of that whole idea of unbundling in TV and people saying, oh, well, I don't need to have the bundle anymore. I'm going to go a la carte, to this kind of extraordinary rebundling that's going on. And what's happening now is, instead of unbundling the cable, we're now uncabling the bundle, which is sort of an interesting idea. And it's going to be fascinating to see what the redress of the balance of advertising in the CTV mixes, because I think we got very used to the idea of there being these ad-free zones on HBO Max, as it was called then, on Netflix and on Amazon Prime. And as Scott Galloway said a couple of years ago, if you're young enough or rich enough, you need never see an ad again. Yet now, and the prediction I would never have made if we'd been having this conversation 2 years ago, is Amazon Prime taking ads and Netflix taking ads. And what's going to be intriguing, that those two, alongside Pluto, Fubo, Tubi, and other ones in the FAST world, are I think, going to be very significant in the total contribution of inventory in the market. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the linear versus non-linear TV market works out.
Yeah, I think it is very true. I think there's going to be the channels or the networks that you watch mainly where people will pay for the ad-free version, but then they're the ones where I just want to watch this show. I'm not sure I really want to commit. We watched Dope Sick the other night with my wife, and it was on Hulu. And apparently, we don't watch much Hulu, so we watched it with ads, and because there wasn't other platform or other or shows that we should be watching. So it seems like they're going to be that's going to be sort of the go-to is the ad supported versions for the ones that aren't the main channels or the main networks that people watch would be my take.
It's curious to me that most of these services, most of the streaming services, if you look at them objectively, they are tremendous value for money. If you pay $15, $16 a month or something like that for, a Netflix sort of prototypically, or $20 to some people at Netflix. If you think about it on a cost per hour consumed basis, it's tremendous value for money. The challenge for lots of people is that they had a brief window in early period Netflix streaming where almost everything that was streaming was available on Netflix. And so Netflix then was tremendous value for money because your $15 bought you 90% of all streamed content. And now it doesn't. And it's a very, very problematic user experience, I think. And I think a combination of the problematic user experience, problems with ad delivery and frequency capping and so forth, is there's a lot of teething issues to get over in the streaming market to make ad-supported streaming a great advertiser and a great user experience.
Yeah. By the way, if I could just jump in, another thing that I think is going to fuel the growth of more ad-supported inventory in CTV is going to be the switching of sports rights, which, as you know, are in the process of switching over from linear television. I think that's going to also fuel the growth of the inventory, along with the creation of ad-supported tiers. And I agree with what Rob is saying. The consumer experience is still not a great experience. I mean, there's still not a great search experience, by the way, on streaming, just to sort of be able to identify, content that's of interest. And the ad experience has also had its issues. Frequency, over frequency has continued to be an issue. And some of those issues have to be figured out and worked out to sort of make this measurement, by the way, is another issue, which is often lacking. And so there's still some things the industry needs to figure out, but we're getting there.
Yeah, the experience of Googling a show to figure out where you can watch it may not be ideal, but perhaps we'll move beyond that. So, in case for those who hadn't been paying attention, we have an election coming up next year. Political advertising has been growing in leaps and bounds, and really with CTV especially as well. Rob, any thoughts on where political advertising goes in 2024, how it evolves and morphs?
Well, Linda has far more expertise on the subject of political advertising than I did. Not by dint of growing up as an American. I've only relatively recently been one, so I'm still aghast at the amount of political advertising that exists at all. What I do see is people always underrate the total volume of political advertising because they think about it as the presidential race. But of course, you've got Senate races, House races, and a million down ballot races. And it's quite extraordinary how many layers there are to political advertising, especially when you then get to the proposition-based advertising at all. And what you get with that, of course, is every single one of those has a completely different regional and local blend, because as we all know, people are trying to win the minds of undecided voters, both of them, wherever they live. But it's impossible to actually control at that level. So the impact it has on the overall demand pattern of TV is just extraordinary.
Yeah, especially for the local advertisers. Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
I mean, it's definitely all about local for political advertising. First, it's going to go up in 2024 because it's an election year, and it always goes up in a national election year. And by the way, Rob, I don't know anything about political advertising in the UK, so maybe you can address that.
Well, there basically isn't any.
Really?
Not strictly speaking true, but it's massively limited. I think there's less money spent in total in a British general election than there would be in a New York mayoral race, I think.
Wow.
Could get a big mailbag over that statement, Frost.
But to go back to I mean, it is an opportunity for local, because of what you're trying to do with almost all political advertising, which is to reach undecided voters. And even in a national campaign, that's really looked at a local basis, on a state by state and region by region, county by county level. And so I think that's where the real opportunity is going to come, in local and for more locally focused, advertising businesses. So I think they should see a big jump up in 2024.
Yeah, I mentioned local
And
advertisers. I meant local media sellers when I mentioned earlier. Go ahead, Rob.
And of course, one of the things that political operatives have is that they have been in the business of collecting issues-based and preference-based data to in whatever prescribed geography they want to collect it in, and their ability now to bring their own data to the party of programmatic delivered advertising to CTV is a step change in being able to control the message delivery.
Yeah, we've seen a ton of interest and growth last year and a little bit this year as well in our household addressable target, where political agencies or campaigns can bring street address lists and see a 90% match rate to target those households with CTV or display or video or whatever they're trying to target with them with. And yes, them being able to use that data in such a way that used to be limited to mailers and people working precincts knocking on doors has been I think a big unlock, and we certainly expect to see a lot more of that this year.
Well, of course, it would be one of the interesting tests of sort of big advertising theory. People have always thought in CPG and other categories that the more people you can bring to a category and influence people around the edges and grow the category, the better your brand will do over time. And my own sense is in political issues, you have to actually sort of take the water cooler with you. So you need to make sure that your guy or your woman or your issue or your point of view is up front of broader ranges of the population than just the people who are undecided, because it's all the people around them in their places of work, the other parents at school and so forth, that will be influencers on those people. So anyone that goes down the rabbit hole of saying this is marvelous, I can just target the household, is probably not going to be successful.
Well, the other thing you see is not only undecided voters, but you have get out to vote, right? And so those are decided voters. They're decided. You're trying to get them out to the polls, and then of course fundraising, which is a big part of it. So yeah, we expect a big surge there. Linda, do you have something else on the world of political advertising?
I mean, Rob, I'm not sure. I heard what you were saying about the focus. I mean, my experience with political is that it has been really, really focused on undecideds and, combining some of that data you were talking about for us, the household, data with data about attitudes and beliefs of the electorate in order to try to, identify people that are likely sort of undecideds. And that's where a lot of the money has been spent. But there's still a lot of political money that's spent on traditional TV, by the way. There has been a bit of a reticence to, that money has moved more slowly over to digital than in other areas, in part because it's like a separate siloed thing. And I think people feel like they're not going to lose their jobs over advertising on linear TV. But I think you'll see that changing more in 2024. I mean, you already saw it in some of the past elections.
Yeah, and we see very much a use for household level, but it's usually combined with broader targeting as well. So we've got a specific message for the people we know are on our side. They're to get out the vote, or a specific message for folks on particular issues. But then there's also broader targeting as well to get the whole village out. Well, good. And then, so last topic I wanted to talk about is this idea of omnichannel workflow. Omnichannel is one of the most overused words or most widely used words, meaning different things to different people. But here, what we're really talking about, and something that's near and dear to the world of Simplify, at least, is is folks who are advertisers and agencies. Are they moving more siloed? Are you thinking they moving more siloed? Or what we see in a lot of the smaller mid-sized agencies is they're looking for a broader set of solutions, not just programmatic, but perhaps search, social, other solutions, all under one umbrella. Do you see trends here that you could make predictions on in 2024, how that might evolve?
So all agencies want to be able to plan all channels together. They want to do budget allocation once across those channels, and they want to apply the data once, and they want to see the flow of results and the reporting once. They'll then happily have experts within channels to see how much more extra value you can squeeze out of them. But the idea of being able to control and manage the flow into channels and the outputs from those channels, both for the agencies and for the end customers' agencies, is highly valuable. And I think that what Simplify is doing is bringing that capability to a much deeper range of agencies outside of the holding companies and the top 20 or 30 others at scale. And it makes a big difference to people if they've got those controls in place, because it opens up time for people to think and be smart rather than just grind with inefficient systems.
I mean, it's also an area that will benefit from more automation, right? And, and not having, as many sort of siloed experts. And, that's an area where Gen AI, or just maybe AI in general and machine learning can help. But I mean, look, there's going to definitely be more of this, but there is going to be a need to automate more of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your point with AI is well taken. There's so much learning that occurs campaign to campaign. Simplify, we run 10,000 auto campaigns every month. So there's so much learning that we have, and how do you apply that in a non-biased, data-driven way to the next campaign that you might have? And so I think, in addition to that part of that's a big use of AI. I'm not sure. We'll see how much of it gets there in 24. And then the other thing is all the results, interpreting all the results. We have reams and reams of data coming out about campaigns, and so how do we really distill that down with and automate distilling that down to the real insights that will help the advertiser drive their next campaign or their next creative or their next targeting, or how they'll allocate budgets, et cetera. And so I think if you start putting both of AI over this omni-channel, it really becomes powerful, and all the way from the planning through the analysis side. Well, good. That's those were the main topics we were covering. Did we miss anything, Rob or Linda, that we should be opining on for the for the next year?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple of things we need to think about. There's a very big legal case going on with Google over its alleged search monopoly here. There's big issues going on with Google and Facebook in Europe also. So there's any number of possibilities that could happen, even as far as breakup of certain aspects of Google's business. And that would be pretty seismic in the market, because it will increase competition. It will also increase complexity to a significant degree for certain people. But I think it's very, very important that businesses like Simplify and all of its customers are very, very aware of where regulators are going to take this game over the next year or two. Because I think it's going to be significant, and it doesn't seem to me like some kind of phony war with no outcome.
And the other side of that is, we have this question of government regulation, both in the US and in the EU, what's going to happen there, judicial action. But then you still have this increasing consolidation, that's happening, amongst large scale media players. It just seems to be progressing. And, there's a cost to that. There's a cost in terms of transparency, visibility, measurement. You're seeing sort of the industry go back to these walled gardens. And that's, again, why I think, platforms like Simplify are important, in that they're looking across everything and providing, that visibility to your clients. It's going to be super important. Measurement I've often said is at an all-time low, as we see increasing consolidation of the industry, and it puts, it creates an opportunity, frankly, for companies like Simplify to come in and to, be that advocate for their clients looking across the industry.
There's a lot of advertisers that were sold the most accountable medium in history, and are disappointed that they can't even count it, much less account for it.
I mean, it's actually sort of amazing that we're still having so many issues in digital advertising about simple things like viewability and brand safety, and we're sitting here on the cusp of 2024 and still talking about these issues, and these things are going to continue to need to get cleaned up in this industry.
That and the other small one, of course, is identity and privacy, which is a moving target, and we'll see how that shakes out in
Another moving
2024.
target.
Probably that's worth a whole podcast on its own, would be my take.
Well, you know what? If you need a new sheriff in the business, look no further than Fort Worth, Texas.
There you go. Well, great. Well, Linda, Rob, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed it and appreciate your thoughts and insights like always. And to everyone who joined us, thank you for the time. And we look forward to talking again soon. Bye-bye.